You are listening to the Addington Highlands North Frontenac Audio Driving Tour, brought to you by the Land O'Lakes Tourist Association. We have been promoting our beautiful Land O'Lakes since 1943 and are pleased to have you with us today. We will begin our tour in the village of Cloyne, which is approximately 20 kilometers north of the hamlet of Calidar on Highway 7. Please park near the largest building in Cloyne, the North Addington Education Center, or NAEC for short. Highway number 41 is the main street and is also the county line in the village. The west side of the highway is in Lennox and Addington County and is designated by the green civic address or 911 signs, while the east side of the highway is in Frontenac County, designated by the blue signs. You can find more information about our history, and indeed much of the content from this tour is derived from locally available books such as The Oxen and the Axe by the Cloyne and District Historical Society, The Mazinaw Experience by John Campbell, Lennox and Addington County by Orland French, plus further personal accounts and contributions from the Cloyne and District Historical Society. This driving tour will guide you over a distance of 114 kilometers through 2 townships in 2 different counties. That's 70 miles for our American friends. We will see much evidence of our local history, and I will share with you some of our myths and legends along the way, including tales of the old-timers who first settled in this remote area. The tour should take 3 hours, give or take, depending on how fast you drive and how long you take at stops. We encourage you to linger and enjoy this largely untouched region of eastern Ontario. If you get hungry along the tour, approximately halfway in the drive, you will be in the village of Plevna, a nice place for lunch or a snack at the local restaurant. You will be prompted to push pause or stop on your audio player with this tone. Between some of the longer stops, you can restart when you arrive at the next destination. Please obey the speed limits and respect private property along the way. I will include where you can park if you wish to take longer and explore the historic points of interest. Occasionally, I will announce GPS coordinates for our tech-savvy visitors, although my direction should be clear enough that you will not require a GPS. Our free Land O'Lakes maps are available virtually everywhere in the region. It's always good to have one in the car, and don't forget to visit us on the web at www.travellandolakes.com for events and news. Our many community libraries have high-speed internet and welcome visitors to browse, use the internet, and check email. So, please buckle up, and let's get started. Many of the early settlers that came to this area were Irish, and one such visitor named the village in honor of the village of Cloyne in County Cork, Ireland. Our village celebrated its 150th anniversary of the naming of Cloyne in 2009. If you are parked near the school, your GPS coordinate should be north 44 degrees, 49.07 minutes by west 77 degrees, 11.15 minutes. Our elevation is now 270 meters. Keep track of our elevation, and you will realize why this township is named Addington Highlands. The school is a rarity in the province, since it serves all of the children in the region from junior kindergarten to grade 12, all under one roof. Classmates are friends for life and grow up and learn together in this closely knit community school. The teachers become close friends and mentors to many of the pupils. NAEC currently has approximately 360 students and 30 teaching staff. When the school was built in 1963, it was for secondary students. In 1971, when the small elementary schools in Calidar, Flinton, Harlow, Northbrook, and Cloyne were closed, the amalgamated school, NAEC, was born. Just recently, the JK to grade 6 school in neighboring Denby closed, so that all students from both Addington Highlands and the local parts of North Frontenac municipalities are now bused to Cloyne. The provision of many educational programs wasn't always this way in the Land O'Lakes region. There are many one-room schoolhouses still remaining in the area, although none are currently used as schools. Most have been sold to the community or the municipalities and transformed them into town halls. Some have been sold privately for other uses. We will drive by several on our route, and I will point them out to you so you can see that at one time every community had its own school. Most had no indoor plumbing, so outhouses were the norm. Before buses, children walked to school or rode their horses. Riding bicycles to school was common after World War II. For the sake of efficiency and wider selection of curricular activities, the schools became larger. Some say the education was not necessarily better in the day of the one-room schoolhouse. It was just different. School board amalgamations happened first in the 1960s, when county school boards were formed. In 1998, the current Limestone District School Board was formed, which now governs the education in a huge area encompassing Napanee to Denbigh to Kingston. This is a good time to zero your odometer. Watch for traffic and pull out onto Highway number 41 and head north. Turn left. Only 100 meters north, on the east side of the highway, is the Cloyne Pioneer Museum, a perfect place to visit before or after your tour, but unfortunately only open during the summer or by appointment. There is a picnic area beside the museum, a resting place after your visit inside, or enjoy an ice cream from Grand Store across the road, one of the oldest buildings in Cloyne. Approximately 300 meters north of NAEC, you will notice the vacant Land O'Lakes Inn across from Cloyne Village Foods. Once the Cloyne School, the inn was expanded and at one time had a bar, dining room, and several rooms for rent. On your right, you will pass Cloyne Village Foods. It has arguably the largest Muskoka or Adirondack chair in Canada. Feel free to stop and get your photo taken on the popular chair. Proceed north on Highway number 41 for 1 kilometer, then turn left on the Scutamata Lake Road. The smooth highway number 41 you were just driving on was once only a wagon trail known as the Addington Road, one of several original colonization roads. In the mid-1850s, the Government of Canada West had the desire to create a network of roads to open to the north, and so embarked on building a 1,600-kilometer road system through the rocky wilderness of eastern Ontario. The Addington Road was one such road that meanders from the Clare River south of Calidar north to Denbigh. For the most part, Highway 41 followed the Addington Road on its way north to Denbigh. One of its divergences from the highway is the road you are currently on, which follows the Lennox and Addington and Frontenac counties border. Pause the audio and restart when you arrive at number 305 Scutamata Lake Road in front of the White Schoolhouse, now a private cottage. Park alongside the roadside. This tiny schoolhouse was the first school in the region, built in 1868. It's called the Loon Lake School, originally named after the lake just ahead, now called Scutamata. It is well maintained, but is on private property. Please remain in your car. Continue driving slowly along the Addington Road and stop 30 meters in the low area of the road just past the civic address sign at number 475 Scutamata Lake Road. Here you will find the remains of a corduroy, or log, in the east side of the road, one of several logs used to shore up early roads in swampy areas. This is the only remaining log or corduroy that is obvious on this audio tour, and could have been placed here as early as the mid-1800s. Today, portions of the corduroy road still exist in low, swampy areas of several township secondary roads, but are disappearing as they rot away and new gravel is added to the roads. Continue up the road and past the well-kept log cabin nestled in the tall white pines at number 575, and stop another 400 meters where the road turns sharply right. You can park here for a few moments on the gravel road that leads due north, now named Addington Road 4. Restart the audio when you arrive at Addington Road 4. This is again the original Addington Colonization Road, which continues due north to Bon Echo Park and beyond, but is not passable by car up ahead. Colonization roads were successful in the flatter areas north of Toronto, where road building was much easier. With a huge influx of immigrants, the government thought colonization roads would open the northern areas to the fertile lands required for settlement farming. The land of northern Lennox and Addington and Frontenac is much different land than that found north of Toronto. Soil was often thin and poor, and the land was irregular and rocky. Road building was a much tougher task than anyone first imagined. Like most colonization roads, the Addington Road was built in sections. Also called the Perry Road, it was first proposed in 1853 by David Gibson of the Department of Crown Lands. Aylesworth B. Perry, surveyor and superintendent, contracted the job, which resulted in a road from the county of Addington, as it was then called, north to Madawaska. It was felt that one or two roads connecting the lumbering districts on the Ottawa with the back settlements of the districts of Lake Ontario would be of great benefit to all parties. It would facilitate and cheapen the supplies to the lumberman and stimulate the farmer to raise larger crops, for which he would find a ready home and cash market and employment for himself and his teams during the winter. Perry employed local contract workers who left the road building in June when the mosquitoes were intolerable and returned again in September. In 1856, a progress report stated that the Addington Road had 17 miles of summer road and 39 miles of winter road. The winter road was much easier to build and to navigate, and was often used by horse and sleigh. The snow covered the rocks and crevices, while natural ice bridges covered the frozen creeks along the way. Eventually, the winter roads were improved to be called summer roads, and were passable with horse and wagon. You can continue on the pavement section slowly at 40 kilometers per hour towards Highway number 41, then stop at the intersection. Continue playing the audio for the moment. Perry gave frequent reports of the success of his road, although he was likely overly optimistic as to the suitability of the area as farmland and its economic fortunes. When asked in 1856, are the lands of the backcountry of a quality to reward the agriculturalist for his labors? He replied,
I would beg leave to say that in my opinion, that wheat, rye, oats, peas, barley, and Indian corn flourishes. Potatoes and other bulbous roots exceed the growth in older townships. I have in no instance seen clover tried, but am of the opinion that at no distant day, if attention is turned towards it, clover will be one of the staples of this section of the country.
When asked the probable future of the settlement, he wrote,
I look forward at no distant day for an industrious, intelligent, and rich population to be spread over the lands of our interior. If this should take place, that is a railway through the area, we will have cities where I only anticipated villages and towns instead of hamlets.
Obviously, Mr. Perry was overly optimistic. A railway was built through Caladar and has since closed. Cities never materialized. Farmland has never been as rich and fertile as he predicted. Much of the distance you just passed was once farmland that supplied the lumber camps and later the Bon Echo Inn on Mazinaw Lake. We will talk about both shortly. When you reach Highway number 41, again turn left and head north. Continue only 1.1 kilometer and then turn right on the South Mazinaw Heights Road and stop along the road exactly 400 meters from the corner. Resume the recording when you reach this spot. Your GPS coordinate should be north 44 degrees, 44.52 minutes by west 77 degrees, 11.54 minutes. This region was likely first explored in the mid-1800s to search for lumber. Explorers used the waterways to go north and found this area was relatively untouched. Virgin white pine was everywhere and the most desirable lumber for tall Navy ship masts back in England. The giant white pines were felled with crosscut saws, transported to the waterways often by horse and sleigh, then floated downstream to the huge lumber mills in either Trenton or Ottawa. Of the many lumber firms that operated in the area in the mid to late 1800s, the Gilmour Lumber Company was prominent. Based in Trenton, Ontario, at the outlet of the Myer River, the large Gilmour Mill had a voracious appetite for logs. In 1888, it was reputed that the Trenton Mill had perhaps the largest cutting capacity in the world, although it never had run at full capacity. This need for lumber necessitated the firm's purchase of timber rights in the Algonquin area and to a lesser extent around the current Bon Echo Park area in an effort to keep feeding the mammoth mill. In the case of Bon Echo, Gilmour constructed a magnificent rail system or tramway that enabled the company to utilize two water systems, the Mississippi in the east on Mazinaw Lake to Pringle Lake on the west, a tributary of the Moira River running south to his huge mill in Trenton. This was an engineering marvel of its time, providing a way for Gilmour to sell Mazinaw white pine and transport it by a completely different water system. The embankment that held the railway can still be seen today as it travels through the forest between Mazinaw and Pringle Lakes in an amazingly straight line, a direction of 240 degrees southwest. An embankment of earth and stone was built by hand to elevate the rails above the rough terrain and swamps, in some areas nearly 2 meters high and 2 meters wide. Most of the railway is on private property, but can be seen as a hump on both sides of Mazinaw Heights Road continuing across Highway 41 on its way to Pringle Lake. Pringle Lake is 43 meters higher than the Mazinaw and covers 2 kilometers to the west. Starting at Mazinaw, Gilmour devised a jackladder, a steam-powered hoist, to lift the logs up the steep 70-meter embankment from the lake, a full 28 meters vertically. Then, on a system of steel rails, horse-drawn carriages transported the logs up another 25 meters vertically, an average grade of 2%, before descending 13 meters to Pringle Lake. The hoist was located on the Mazinaw to provide maximum lift in the minimum distance while also minimizing the uphill grade on the tramway line. Even though the Mazinaw tramway could move fewer logs per day than Gilmour's much larger Dorset, Ontario tramway, which could move an average of 2,400 logs per day, the Mazinaw tramway had an advantage. It was not dependent upon water and therefore could operate more months per year. This seasonality was ultimately one of the main causes of failure for the Dorset operation and Gilmour logging. The Mazinaw tramway was used as early as the 1850s and continued for about 40 years. Today, the tramway is a hidden memorial to our lumbering era 150 years ago and a testament to the ingenuity of the engineers of the day. If you haven't discovered the embankment, another place to see the railway is back on Highway 41. Turn your car around and drive back to the Highway number 41 intersection. Turn right and drive exactly 300 meters. On the east side of the highway, you can see the embankment or tramway. Your GPS reading should be north 44 degrees, 52.42 minutes by west 77 degrees, 11.65 minutes. The embankment continues on the west side of the highway in a straight line. Pause the audio here if you wish to explore along the highway, but be careful of traffic and restart when you are finished exploring. Now is a good time to zero your odometer and travel north from the intersection of Highway 41 and the South Mazinaw Heights Road for 6.3 kilometers to the next turn. You will enter and leave the Bon Echo Park boundaries, marked by the cairns and signs. You proceed down a large hill and near the bottom take a sharp right turn called the North Mazinaw Heights Road. Then head south along the lakeshore.
So the big question is, how did people get here? The Department of Agriculture in the mid-1850s and 60s distributed pamphlets within Upper and Lower Canada as well as abroad, primarily to Britain and with translations to other countries, particularly Germany. This early form of advertising told of the wonderful fertile land available here for farming and described in great detail how little work was required for fabulous crops to grow. Most of the British Isles settlers, particularly the Irish and Scots, headed for Cloyne and area, while many Germans went to Denby, a hamlet approximately 50 kilometers north of where you are now. What they all found when they arrived was that the land, instead of being a bonus, was going to make living here challenging. Imagine arriving in the Napanee area. Unless you have a lot of money saved up, you must hire a horse and wagon for the journey to the north, instead of purchasing a team, carrying with you whatever supplies you can afford. You've been directed north on the Addington Road to Tamworth, the home and office of Ebenezer Perry, the land agent. You choose a lot from him. It's free because you've made the commitment to come here. As long as you fulfill the conditions set out for settlers, you can take legal possession of your land in 5 years. You must be 18 years of age, have 4.9 hectares, or 12 acres, cleared and cultivated in crops within 4 years, construct a house at least 18 by 20 feet in size, and live on the land for at least 6 months of the year. You are given directions and you start off up the Addington Road, which in spots is where we have been today. As you fight your way through the bush, signs of other settlers become less and less frequent. North of Erinsville would have been an adventure through the wilderness of forest and swamps. You arrive in what would become Caladar, and you certainly couldn't farm there because of the rocks of the Canadian Shield. You continue north through more bush and swamps, hopes fading that there will be any arable land available anywhere. Those who continued north to Denby, Vennachar and area, however, were indeed rewarded for their patience, as there were, and still are, some plots of fertile land suitable for farming. Many of the settlers of German extraction had come because they had been told of the wonderful farmland. What no one was told was that it was covered in very large trees, which would have to be cut before any farming could be done. Most of the land provided subsistence farming at best. Some people left right away. Many stayed because of the work available in timbering, working in the bush during the winter and farming the rest of the year. When the logging was over and the market for their crops disappeared, some of these settlers moved as well. The program could be called a disaster, but the colonization roads remained and were improved over time.
You are traveling south on this old section of Highway number 41, which was swallowed up by Bon Echo Provincial Park when the highway was rerouted and reconstructed up over the long hill which you have just descended. Notice that the green civic address signs turn blue because you are crossing the county line again, as we were back in Cloyne. Proceed down the mostly cottage road until you come to an overlook on Mazinaw Lake, which is just past number 185 on the road. Stop at the overlook on the lakeside on the road, pause your audio, and restart when you arrive. Your GPS should read north 44 degrees, 54.86 minutes by west 77 degrees, 12.43 minutes, elevation 272 meters. You are now viewing the famous Mazinaw Rock, depicted in so many of the paintings of the Group of Seven. As you stand looking at the lake and the rock, around the point on your right is the boundary of Bon Echo Provincial Park. Said to be the second busiest provincial park in Ontario after the famous Algonquin Park, Bon Echo has lured people to the majestic Mazinaw Rock for centuries. Evidence of the first inhabitants can be seen by canoe or boat along the face of the rock. Aboriginal artists painted nearly 300 native pictographs over a stretch of 1 kilometer. Exactly who painted them and why is unknown, as is the age of the paintings. It is believed they could be 400 years old or more, and possibly painted by the Ojibwa. As Canada's most accessible collection of Aboriginal pictographs, their true meaning will always be a mystery. The rock itself is roughly 100 meters high, with another 100 meters of cliff being beneath the water's surface. Mazinaw Rock is a fault line, and is a part of the Canadian Shield, some of the oldest rock on the planet. This entire area was covered by a glacier of ice 1 mile in thickness, creating super compression of the rock and earth. The glacier melted 12,000 years ago, and now the land slowly rises at almost undetectable amounts, but it's still rising. If you wish to take photos or explore, stop the audio now and restart when you wish to proceed. Drive another 400 meters south until you find a public boat launching dock on your left, along with a small parking lot at number 371. Pull off and stop here. You are now at Tapping's Landing, named after one of the early settlers who farmed in this area. Much of his original farm lies ahead of you to the west and south, within Bon Echo's park boundaries. Tapping came here in 1865 and established one of the more successful farms that supplied the burgeoning lumber camps. He later became reeve or mayor of the township and was well respected in the community. In the 1850s, logging was brisk in this area. Imagine, as you look at the lake, a giant boom of white pine logs moving slowly along the lake toward the tramway, the location of which you have already seen. Food had to be brought in from great distances, so settlers were encouraged to establish farms to supply food to the loggers, as well, of course, to their own families. Offers of new prosperity and free land were circulated. Looking at the countryside around you and behind you, it would be hard to tell that this was once cultivated land. Bon Echo had an inn long before it had a provincial park. Dr. Weston Price, a Cleveland dentist, honeymooned with his wife on Mazinaw Lake and fell in love with this large tract of land that became known as Bon Echo. They built an elaborate inn that opened in 1899. After the unexpected death of their son, the Prices sold the inn to Flora MacDonald Dennison in 1910, who transformed the inn to a cultural retreat for artists and the elite. Mrs. Dennison was a devotee of the American poet Walt Whitman and commissioned a memorial to his democratic ideals, which he had engraved on the face of the rock at a location near where the rock cliff disappears behind the point of land on your right. It is entitled Old Walt and can be seen by boat. Many of the Group of Seven and other artists visited Bon Echo Inn to paint the landscapes of Bon Echo. They included A.Y. Jackson, A.J. Kaysen, Charles Comfort, and Arthur Lismer. Merrill Dennison knew these artists from the Arts and Letters Club in Toronto. He took over the inn after the death of his mother Flora around 1922 and continued to run it for several years. The inn burned to the ground in 1936. Merrill became one of Canada's great authors and playwrights and continued writing to his death in 1975, but not before he had bequeathed Bon Echo to the province of Ontario for the enjoyment of all its citizens, perhaps the greatest gift of all in the history of Ontario. If you have never visited Bon Echo Provincial Park, it is a must-see. It claims nearly 200,000 camper visits annually. Of course, we have already passed the main park entrance earlier on Highway number 41. We will leave the actual exploration of Bon Echo itself for another day and another tour, because it has a rich history too. The public dock is the avenue many cottagers from the other side of Mazinaw Lake use to get to their water-only access cottages. If you wish to dangle your feet in the water and watch for loons, you can pause the audio now, zero your odometer again, and restart when you leave. Turn around and drive back north the way you came and continue north on Highway number 41. Just north of our present location and about 1/3 of the way across the lake is a hole in Mazinaw Lake that extends to a depth of 475 feet. This makes Mazinaw the second deepest inland lake in Ontario, next to Lake Nipigon at North Bay. No one knows what it's like down there since it's so deep and dark. However, there is ongoing exploration of the bottom sediment by a scientific team. The team will take sediment samples from the bottom and analyze the pollen content to reveal the true forest makeup centuries earlier. Before you head too far north, we should mention the legend of the Mazinaw Monster. Some say it's not a legend at all, as they have seen the giant serpent that frequents the depth of the lake. People have reported the creature as being a multi-humped serpent, or a log-like object that travels swiftly through the water. Reputable claims have been made of seeing the 16-foot-long creature, even in shallow water, with the dorsal fin protruding above water. Early pioneers have reported seeing the Mazinaw Monster. A county constable, Mont Woods, reported seeing a giant fish the size of a canoe in the Mazinaw. Mr. Woods later worked for the Ministry of Natural Resources, and while taking fish counts on the Mazinaw, reported that one of his gill nets came out of the water with a 1-meter hole in it. The monster could be a sturgeon, a prehistoric fish that can live up to 150 years and achieve lengths of 16 feet or longer and weigh in excess of 400 pounds. Listen to this eyewitness account by Cindy Cassidy, General Manager of the Eastern Ontario Trail Association. What lurks behind the surface in Mazinaw Lake?
It was a couple of years ago. I think it was about 2008, and in August we went out golfing to the golf course within the area, and anyway, we come back, and Patsy, my friend, and myself were warm from golfing, and all the rest of the group were busy getting ready for lunch and stuff, so we decided to go down because we love to swim anyway off the dock and on the sandbar. So we went down, and it was a calm, clear day. There were no boats around, no people around, just the two of us on the dock. So we started heading out on the sandbar, and then halfway out on the sandbar, I just happened to look up, and I said, after a couple of seconds, it took me after I seen it, and I said to Patsy, "What's that?" And she goes, "Well, that's the Mazinaw Monster, sturgeon." And anyway, so it seemed to have a whale's tail. It was big. We figure at least 15 feet, if not longer. And I said, "Where's the boat on that wake?" Because it looked like it should have a boat. That's how fast it was going. And it just kept going and going, and I was really nervous that it might come up on the sandbar, so I started stepping backwards really carefully so it wouldn't dart at me, and I got to the dock and I was just shaking because it made me really scared because it was so big. And it seemed to have a whale's body, and anyway, it was just motoring really fast.
Continuing north approximately 7 kilometers, you come to the inlet of Mazinaw Lake, and beyond that, another 10 kilometers to McAvoy Lake. You are close to the headwaters of the Canadian Mississippi River watershed, which runs through much of eastern Ontario and empties into the Ottawa River at Arnprior. Continue north on Highway 41, and watch for a small schoolhouse converted to a home at number 18129 Highway number 41. If you zeroed your odometer at Tappings Bay Dock, the odometer should read 8.6 kilometers at the schoolhouse. Proceed to the McChesney Lake Road on your left and park at the entrance of the road. Your odometer should read 9.8 kilometers. Pause the audio and restart when you reach the road. Your GPS should read north 44 degrees, 59 minutes by west 77 degrees, 16.1 minutes. This is the road that leads to the site of Massanoga, at one time a busy little village built by the Sawyer-Stoll Lumber Company in 1939. When the timber rights for this area were first acquired by the Michigan-based company, Wallace Johnston was sent in as general manager and moved here with his family to manage the mill and start a new life. Wallace did not believe in clear-cutting. Rather, they selectively cut trees and skidded them with teams of horses. Unfortunately, this land is now private property. However, there is very little to see anyway, as all of the buildings have been taken down. Massanoga was built on the shores of Stoll Lake, which included a large mill, company office, store, bunkhouses, staff houses, and 12 cabins. Boardwalks were placed on the ground to make it easy walking, as sawdust was everywhere. Up to 200 employees worked at the mill. Wages averaged $8 to $10 per day. A recreational hall for pool and movies was built, as was a school for the children. You've already passed the one-room schoolhouse, which was built on company land at number 18129 Highway 41. Children would walk or ride to this school each day, about 2 miles each way. Sawyer-Stoll wanted the hemlock that was uncut during the first big white pine cut in the mid to late 1800s. They put hemlock on the map. Originally, a planing mill was located at the main site in Massanoga. But in 1945, it was moved to Calidar, where lumber from the Sawyer-Stoll's other operations around eastern Ontario could be shipped by rail to Calidar for planing. Trucks roared down Highway number 41 24 hours a day to the planing mill in Calidar, and the finished lumber traveled by rail to major markets. Eventually, each of the hemlock was harvested. Together with increased competition from large rail shipments from British Columbia, Sawyer-Stoll began to see tough times. A large fire at one of its field camps helped to seal the fate of the Massanoga operation. It closed in 1975, with operations moving south to Calidar and Tweed. Operation of the Sawyer-Stoll Lumber Company finally ceased completely in about 1999, having been in operation in and around this area for 60 years. As with many lumbering towns, nothing more remains today except a few concrete foundations. Wallace Johnston died in 1958, but his children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren still enjoy the Massanaw area from their summer cottage on the lake. You can now pause and restart when you reach McAvoy Lake, just ahead at number 18803 Highway 41. At number 18803 Highway 41, at the north end of McAvoy Lake, you will reach the 45th parallel or latitude. At this point, you are equal distance to the equator and to the North Pole. Proceed 10 kilometers north of here to a large hill, known as Eagle Hill. Pause the audio until you reach Ashby Lake Road, at the foot of Eagle Hill, and restart. In the summer and fall of 1876, Mr. Samuel Lane was the overseer of the road construction crew for the Addington Road. He kept a diary of the work project, which today provides insight into the magnitude of the job of maintaining a north route through the wilderness. Here are some of his passages.
July 8, 1876. The Addington Road in this vicinity is as bad a specimen of road as could be found in the province. The day is very hot, the thermometer 85 degrees in the shade. One man sick had to lay up. July 18th, the thermometer 98 degrees in the shade, but plenty of good pork and bread appears to keep my men in heart, although they suffer from the heat and mosquitoes. July 22nd, closely examined this Eagle Hill, located between the head of Mazinaw and the village of Vennachar this day, and find it shall require much labor to improve it. In its present state, it is the terror of teams and teamsters. No wagon can be made to stand it a few times. If I can succeed in turning and keeping the water from running down it, I shall do well, as every work put on it for the past has washed clearly away, leaving it like the bed of an old river. The acid in some places is 10-foot rise for every 16 feet, and boulders step after step.
By September of 1876, Samuel Lane was complaining about the inferior tools to work on the road being all worn out. Lane commented that the Addington Road could be made a passable road if a man had enough money to expend on it. Eventually, the work was completed, not to his satisfaction, but even he admitted that it was an improvement, a fact which was borne out by an increase in population in the remotest part of this county. For many years, Eagle Hill remained one of the most difficult parts of the Addington Road, and later Highway number 41, to maintain. In rainy weather, it was almost impassable. In the spring flooding of 1998, it was a section of Eagle Hill that was completely washed away, pavement, gravel bed, and all. Continue north up the hill a few kilometers until you drive into a small cluster of houses known as Vennachar Junction. Turn right on the Buckshot Lake Road and continue southeast towards the village of Vennachar, approximately 3 kilometers. Park in the village and pause the audio and restart when you arrive at number 884 Buckshot Lake Road, Vennachar. You are now at a high point, approximately 417 meters elevation, roughly 50 meters higher than where you started in Cloyne. Notice the sign when you enter the village at number 884 Buckshot Lake Road. Vennachar, the poke and plum town. Please drive carefully. We have no undertaker. By the late 1850s, the first settlers in the area had followed the Addington Road and trails of the lumber companies into this northern part of Lennox and Addington County and settled the northern community of Vennachar. The name Vennachar was presumably taken from the beautiful Lake Vennachar in Perthshire, Scotland. As the land was cleared, houses and barns were built. These were soon followed by stores, 2 churches, cheese factories, a log schoolhouse, and a small hotel. Then came the big fire which dealt such a blow to the community it never fully recovered. It happened during the day in late April of 1903. A fire fed by brush left behind after recent timbering operations started on the east side of the Mazinaw Lake. Fanned by strong south wind, the fire came roaring up past McAvoy Lake, past Eagle Hill, and into the Vennachar settlement. In a very short time, it had swept across about 4 miles of the settled part of the community, leaving behind a path of black, smoky ruins. Another fire the same day burned through the Snake Creek area west of Denby, while a third fire broke out in the Glenfield and Rose Hill area of North Vennachar. The first home to be threatened was that of Wellington Holmes. Mr. Holmes was in Denby at the time, having some wheat ground into flour at the Petzold grist mill. As the fire approached, Mrs. Holmes carried the children some distance from the house and waited and hoped. Mrs. Holmes was 5 months pregnant at the time. The fire swept past to the west of the clearing, and the house was spared, but the wooden bridge at the foot of Bridge Hill was not. Most of the loss suffered from the big fire was at the intersection of the Buckshot Lake, Mazinaw Road, where you are now. The relatively new schoolhouse was destroyed, while just across the road, the original log schoolhouse, built in 1866, escaped. Wesley Connor's residence, which included the post office and small store, was completely destroyed. Just east of the Connor store was the Vennachar House, a small hotel attached to the John Gilmour residence. At one time, a small store had been included here. Everything was burnt to the foundations. Drive about 200 meters east on the Buckshot Lake Road. During the big fire, George Sweetman's large house and barn were burned, but nearly on the same brow of the hill, at number 942, the Methodist Church escaped unharmed. Stop and park at the church. Take a look at the sign at the church. It states, "Survivor of the 1903 fire." The church has stood here since 1875. Pause and restart the audio when you leave the church. Across the road, the house in which the minister lived and a new parsonage under construction went up in smoke and were never rebuilt. Burning embers like flying torches were carried by the strong wind a mile or so ahead of the main front. These started smaller fires in many places. As the fire swept to the north, 6 homes and their large barns and the Free Methodist Church were right in the path of the fire. However, none of these suffered any damage to the buildings. No one knows what further losses the community might have suffered if a good shower of rain had not come when it did. Some thought the rain was divine intervention, and perhaps they were right. As the story goes, the dense smoke blotted out the sun and the very heavens seemed to be on fire. Jane Jackson, a very devout Christian, knelt in the dust of the road near her home and prayed for rain. She believed that God, who sent rain in answer to Elijah's prayer, would send rain to answer hers. It is amazing that in spite of the number of buildings burned and the speed the fire traveled, there was no loss of human life. Proceed to the tiny Vennachar Cemetery at number 1033 Buckshot Lake Road and have a walk around, but please respect the cemetery and leave no trace of your visit behind. Pause and restart the audio when you continue your journey. Continue your drive southeasterly down the Buckshot Lake Road toward Plevna. This is a very old road with at least one, if not two, vanished villages, places where people lived in the 1800s and early 1900s, but where there are not even any signs of habitation now. One such village was called Wensley, established in 1861, which had a school, cheese factory, and several houses. There was certainly enough population here to field a hockey team, as we know that there was a league consisting of teams from Denby, Vennachar, and Wensley. There is nothing left of Wensley now, except a little clearing by the side of the road where the school used to be. A group of Kellers were among the first settlers in the Wensley community. They were gone from this area in the late 1800s. SS No. 6 School was built in 1869 as a joint or union school for the townships of Barry and Abinger. As was often the case in settler times, it was built and maintained by the settlers for many years. Fred Winsley was the teacher for several years. The school burned around 1914, but classes resumed in the old cheese factory. Arch Winsley remembers sitting on the long benches which had been used to hold the cheese boxes, while in the spring the water ran under the floor because the factory extended over the water of Buckshot Creek. You can stop for a rest at number 3014 Buckshot Lake Road. Pause and restart when you arrive. You are now on Mallory Hill. There has never been hydro here, and today only telephone exists. Your GPS coordinate should be north 45 degrees, 1.66 minutes, by west 77 degrees, 1.66 minutes. You are again on the 45th parallel at an elevation of 380 meters. In 2008, Mallory Hill was identified by an Ottawa engineer, Frank Roy, as a perfect place for a new astronomy observatory called the 1 Meter Initiative. With no hydro for miles and superbly dark skies, his dream is to build a state-of-the-art observatory on this hill. From a satellite view of the Earth, a dark peninsula of land extends from the north to this very spot, making it the most accessible dark skies in southern Canada, perfect for astronomy. Pause the audio and restart when you arrive at Buckshot Drive on the tip of Buckshot Lake. Buckshot Lake is considered to be a cold water fishery by the Ministry of Natural Resources and known to support lake trout, walleye or pickerel, and bass. Lake trout requires pristine environmental conditions to thrive and are considered to be an environmental barometer. The Buckshot Lake Association routinely monitors water conditions to ensure lake trout and water quality is maintained. New buildings are required to have increased setback from the water's edge to minimize environmental impact. Another concern with our pristine lakes is invasive species such as zebra mussels and spiny water flea, which have infiltrated many more southern lakes. Biologists believe that a high dissolved calcium content is required in the water for zebra mussels to build their shells and multiply. Our lakes on the Canadian Shield, including Buckshot, have low calcium levels and may not support colonies of zebra mussels. Boaters are encouraged to thoroughly wash their boats or leave them exposed to the sun for 5 days before launching in a new lake to prevent the spread of invasive species. Never transfer minnows or release extra live bait into the lakes, since hidden invasive species may be inadvertently introduced. You can pause the audio now and proceed southward on the Buckshot Lake Road and restart when you reach the Plevna sign straight ahead. As you drive into the village of Plevna, turn right at the stop sign on Road 506. You will notice this is a thriving community. It is home to approximately 175 residents and is the business hub for hundreds of cottages that line many of the surrounding lakes. Plevna has a nice restaurant, grocery store, hardware and lumber store, LCBO beer store, and recently some boutiques. The municipal offices and fire station for the township of North Frontenac are just down the road. North Frontenac is the most northern township in Frontenac County, which extends clear to the St. Lawrence River and Wolfe Island. You may decide to stop and enjoy a nice lunch or dinner at the North of 7 restaurant. You'll find family dining here and a friendly, courteous staff, quite common of the Land O'Lakes region. Cheese factories were significant economic milestones for many villages, including Plevna. Cheese factories were established in Plevna and neighboring Ardoch in 1885 and provided an important market to farmers for their milk. The advent of creameries following World War I reduced the milk available to the cheese factories. All were closed before the end of the 1930s. Notice the James's General Store at number 7414 Road 506 in Plevna, now closed as a store but reopened as a restaurant. General stores like James's Store were once the hub of every small community in this region. Most are now closed, however they still remain in Cloyne and Denby. In fact, our tour started next to Grand's General Store in Cloyne. Plevna was originally called Buckshot, and it began when Alicia and Elijah Playfair settled on either side of the Frontenac Road where it crossed Buckshot Creek in 1861. Elijah had his house built by December 1864, but he also had built a school on his lot, had a sawmill in operation and flour mill ready to go. At this time, he was 61. It was the Canadian Post Office Authority that didn't like the name of Buckshot and told the community they had to come up with a better name. Great wrangling ensued, with locals split into factions. Someone suggested that the situation there was almost as bad as that which existed in Plevna, Bulgaria, where there seemed to be a constant battle going on because it was a fortress town, guarding a pass through the Balkan Mountains. The name was a neutral one, and everyone could accept it without losing face. On November 1st, 1877, the village became known as Plevna. As you leave Plevna, stop at the Roman Catholic Church Cemetery on your left across the road from number 6145, Road 506. Pause the audio and restart when you arrive. The first person buried in this cemetery at Ardoch was a river driver from Montreal. His gravestone can likely be seen but is unmarked. The oldest gravestones in this cemetery are simply stones buried into the earth, quite unusual. Have a look around, but please leave no trace of your visit. The swiftness of the waters and log jams both created very dangerous situations for the river drivers. The skill and agility needed to drive the logs was phenomenal. At the dams across the route, a man was stationed 24 hours a day to ensure that no log got crosswise of the slide or chute to start a jam. Many graves can be found along the Madawaska, Mississippi, and Scutamata log routes, most without names or indications of where the loggers originated. Itinerant loggers came for the work. Records of their employment were scarce. Just a short drive down the Ardoch Road, to the east about 2 kilometers, lies the hamlet of the same name. It's optional today, but if you have time, notice the plaque on the top of the bridge recognizing the wild rice in the river and the good relationships of the people of the Ardoch Algonquin First Nations have with the residents of North Frontenac Township. The small hamlet of Ardoch was a very suitable place for a pioneer community and sawmills because it was located directly on the Mississippi River. Ardoch was locally famous for its sawmills, the first of which were operated before 1869, which provided milling opportunities for floorboards, doors, and anything else settlers needed. It wasn't until later, in 1909, that Chandler and Jones built a substantial sawmill in Arden, reputed to be the largest in Ontario at that time. This was the beginning of the first major move of hardwoods from the area to market. Lumbering limits along the Mississippi River in Clarendon Township were held by Allen Gilmour in the 1850s, and then were sold to Gillies and McLaren in 1866. Familiar names in the timbering business in our immediate area include T.A. Wilson, Caldwell, McLaren, and the Canada Lumber Company, which owned a mill at Snyder Depot in the early 1900s. This is now the site of the Boneco family campground on Head Road north of Cloyne. In the 1870s, Boyd Caldwell and Peter McLaren both owned timber rights on the upper Mississippi River, which is basically its headwaters, including Lakes Mazinaw, McAvoy, and Mallory, as well as Plevna and Ardoch areas. McLaren built a dam and timber slide at High Falls north of Ardoch and refused to let Caldwell use the slide. Caldwell appealed to the liberal provincial government of Oliver Mowat, which passed the Rivers and Streams Act in 1881. This made it legal to use private improvements on a water course if compensation was paid to the owner. McLaren appealed to the courts and to the conservative federal government of John A. Macdonald. Macdonald disallowed the act 3 times to protect the rights of property holders. Mowat and Macdonald disagreed over provincial authority to legislate in matters of property rights, as granted at Confederation. The Judicial Committee of the Privy Council ultimately sided with Caldwell, and Mowat's government passed the Rivers and Streams Act again in 1884. This legal decision recognized that the use of Canadian waterways could not be blocked by private interests and helped establish a fundamental principle in federal-provincial relations. If you took this optional drive to Ardoch, return back to Road 506 and turn left, heading away from Plevna. From the Ardoch corner, the next village of Fernleigh is 5.4 kilometers. You will pass number 5892, Road 506, which is one of the area's few airports, called Tomvale. Pause the audio until you reach the hamlet of Fernleigh, then restart. Welcome to the village of Fernleigh. A man by the name of Gus Edgar traced a trail which was used around 1840, which came cross-country from Napanee through Myer's Cave, you'll come to it shortly, and somewhere near Fernleigh. Squatters, people who simply build a cabin anywhere, could be found along the trail. The first permanent settlers arrived in Fernleigh in 1872, and by 1880 the community was well established. The name Fernleigh apparently came from a group at a Sunday school class in the old log schoolhouse, discussing possible names for the community. A man by the name of John Howell looked out a window and, noting the profusion of wild ferns, suggested Fernleigh. Over the years, a school, post office, and store, and other services were set up. The Fleeler family operated a lime kiln as a community service long after the other kilns in the area had ceased operating. A cheese factory operated out of the unfinished church and was later converted to a dedicated cheese factory around 1901. None of the commercial enterprises remain today. Drive towards the next village of Myer's Cave, a distance of 12.3 kilometers. Stop and restart the audio at Myer's Cave Lodge at number 2471 Road 506. Notice the small log building next to the lodge. This is one of the few remaining ice houses in the region. It was used to store ice blocks cut from adjacent Marble Lake in the winter. Large ice blocks numbering in the hundreds, buried in sawdust, would provide refrigeration for ice boxes to keep food from spoiling all summer. The hamlet of Myer's Cave is a bit of a misnomer. Several legends exist about the discovery of a mysterious silver mine by a Captain John Myers. The story of a lost silver treasure surfaced in the late 1800s and early 1900s. Various versions of the story appeared in local papers, including the Kingston Whig Standard, the Napanee Beaver, and the Tweed News. Continue on Road 506 while you hear the story of Myer's Cave and his lost silver treasure, as written by notable playwright Merrill Dennison. Captain John Myer was a trader from the Bay of Quinte. As the story goes, under the guidance of two renegade Indians, who Captain John Myer had bribed, Myer was taken to the source of the native silver brought out front for barter. Whether his story is true or not will never be known, since there are no silver mines ever recorded in this area. The journey took them from Myer's trading post up the Moira River to its headwaters in Lake Scudamata, west of Cloyne, and thence over land to the point of land opposite the Great Cliff, which was likely Mazinaw Rock. There, Myer found a fabulous treasure cave gleaming with stalactites and stalagmites of native silver, but the discovery almost cost him his life. The Indians repented their disclosure and dumped the captain out of their birch canoe almost before the return journey had well begun. It was November, and Myer reached home in a dying condition, racked by pneumonia. He brought with him a small quantity of silver, some of which was made into spoons that are supposed to still be in the possession of his descendants. On his deathbed, the unfortunate captain drew a map of the treasure trove which enjoyed widespread distribution. The grandfather of Merrill Dennison was reputed to have a copy, and during the time when Bonneco was operated, hardly a summer passed that did not see the arrival of one or more secretive, aging prospectors armed with worn and wrinkled copies of the Myer map. During the summer of 1911, two miners from Napanee, Messrs. Sills and Scott, spent upwards of $10,000 scratching at the rock face in pursuit of a clue provided by a barnstorming spiritualistic medium. Late that summer, they found a cave in which Scott fell and broke his leg, but no silver. Further evidence of the extraordinary lure of the Myer's Cave legend was furnished by the rotting timbers of an old cabin on top of the rock, in which a squatter named Van Alston lived for 20 years in search of the elusive treasure. The legend about his lost silver miner cave may have had some truth. Captain John Myer did exist and was recorded as a United Empire loyalist and a founding father of the city of Belleville. He did indeed operate a trading post there and traded with native people. Recent geological mapping suggests a vein of silver does not likely exist in the surrounding rock of Bonneco. However, it is known that native people could have had a hoard of silver stashed in a cave because Algonquians cherished the metal as it was considered sacred. Their shamans used it for ceremonial arrowheads. If a cave exists with silver, it is yet to be found. That brings us back to the hamlet of Myer's Cave. Why was this village named after Captain Myers? Was everyone simply looking in the wrong place for the lost treasure? As we head back west to Cloyne, you'll notice the North Frontenac Township Road 506 is a windy, hilly road. It was formerly a provincial highway number 506 and was turned over to the municipality around the time of municipal amalgamations in 1998. The road was originally built to access the Gatineau Hydro Line, which Road 506 follows and which was built around 1927. Cloyne eventually received electricity from the hydro grid as late as 1939, when World War II was just starting in Europe when Germany invaded Poland, and the movie The Wizard of Oz was first released. Today, the winding 506 road is an attraction for motorcyclists and cyclists who enjoy the hills and curves. North Frontenac also claims to have the most twist per kilometer than anywhere east of the Rockies, something motorcyclists love to hear and experience. You'll probably notice the county trails signs throughout the route. If you love cycling, we encourage you to visit www.countytrails.com to learn more about the County Trails cycling routes. Road 506 ends at highway number 41. Turn right and you will shortly arrive in Cloyne. Turning left or south takes you to Northbrook, Calidar, and Provincial Highway 7. We hope you enjoyed our historical tour. If you'd like to know more about our local history or have comments and ideas for additional tours, please let us know at the Land O'Lakes Tourist's Office in Calidar, or simply call us at 800-840-4445. Or visit our website at www.travellandolakes.com. Also, be sure to stop by the Pioneer Museum in Cloyne for a visit and to find help with your questions pertaining to local history. If you have suggestions on how we can improve our tour, please let us know. Thank you for your interest in our area and have a safe journey wherever you're heading.